My name is Vivian. Last Sunday at my mother's dinner table, I slid an envelope across to her. The moment she saw what was inside, the web of lies she'd spun for all these years unraveled right before our eyes. It was as if a dam had burst, and the truth came rushing out, shattering the illusion of our family. Let me take you back to how it all began. I grew up in a cozy 2-bedroom apartment in the heart of Boston. It was just me and my mom, Emily. She was a hard-working barista at a local coffee shop named Java Junction. She'd work long hours, from the early morning rush to the late afternoon lulls, and would come home smelling of freshly brewed coffee and a hint of cinnamon. Every day when she came through the door, she'd kick off her shoes and say, "How's my amazing girl?" It always made me feel like I was the most important thing in her life. She'd tell me stories about the day I was born, like it was a fairy tale. "You came out screaming, full of life. A healthy 8 pounds, and the nurses were so impressed, they were clapping," she'd say, tucking my hair behind my ear. I believed every word because she was my mom, and she was all I had. Whenever I had a bad day at school, whether it was a failed test or a mean comment from a classmate, she'd hold my face in her hands and say, "You are all I have, Vivian, and you are more than enough." Those words were like a shield for me. I carried them with me to school, to job interviews, and even on those awkward first dates. They made me feel special, chosen. When I was 22, I decided to become a NICU nurse. I was drawn to the idea of taking care of premature babies, those tiny fighters who were born too soon and needed all the love and care they could get. I worked night shifts at St. Mary's Hospital, holding those little ones, adjusting their monitors, and whispering words of comfort when no one else was around. My colleagues said I had a gift for it, that I was calmer with the fragile babies than anyone else on the unit. I never questioned why I felt so at home there, it just felt like where I was meant to be. There's a faint scar on my chest, just below my left collarbone. When I was 8, I asked my mom about it while she was braiding my hair. She told me it was from a tangled umbilical cord during delivery. "Nothing serious, sweetie," she said. I wore high-collared shirts for years, not out of shame, but because she taught me it was our little secret. 3 weeks ago, I was working an afternoon shift at the NICU. It was a quiet Tuesday, with only 3 babies in the unit. 2 were stable, and 1 was on a ventilator. I was charting the vitals of a baby girl born 6 weeks early when the charge nurse called my name from the front desk. "Vivian, someone's here for you. She says it's personal." I walked out, expecting a friend or a patient's family member. What I saw was a woman standing at the counter. She was in her mid-20s, with long brown hair pulled back in a ponytail. She was gripping a manila folder so tightly that her knuckles had turned white, and she was trembling slightly. But what caught my attention first was her face. She looked exactly like me. The same jawline, the same slightly crooked nose, and the same splash of freckles across the bridge of her nose. And when she turned her head, I saw a small brown birthmark behind her left ear, just like mine. My coworker, Lily, who was 24, noticed the resemblance too. Her eyes went wide, and she opened her mouth to say something but then closed it. The woman opened her folder, pulled out a document, and set it on the counter. It was a birth certificate from St. Francis Hospital. Mother, Emily Thompson. Date of birth, May 20th. My birthday, but instead of 1 child, it listed 2, baby A and baby B. She then pulled out a faded photograph of a hospital room with 2 incubators side by side. One baby was clearly larger and healthier looking, while the other was smaller and had tubes running from its nose and chest. "My name is Ava," she said, her voice tight and rehearsed. "I've been looking for you for 6 months." She kept the strong one and took $8,000 to forget me. I should have reacted more emotionally, but as a NICU nurse, I'm trained to stay calm in a crisis. I told her I needed a minute and walked into the break room. I sat down on a plastic chair and stared at my reflection in the dark TV screen on the wall. 1 face, 2 babies. I touched the scar on my chest through my scrubs and thought about the photograph. I sat there for 15 minutes, watching the clock on the microwave. When I went back out, Ava was still there. We exchanged numbers, and she squeezed my hand. Her hand was cold, and mine was even colder. After she left, I somehow managed to finish my shift. It was like I was on autopilot, just going through the motions. At the end of my shift, as I walked past the incubators, I stopped at the whiteboard near the monitoring station. Each baby had a label, a letter, and a number. There was baby A, baby C, and then baby B. I stared at that B written in dry erase marker, and it suddenly hit me. I was baby B. I'd been the smaller, sicker baby, the one left behind. I drove home in the dark, and I knew I had to talk to my mother. That evening, I drove to her apartment without calling first. I parked behind her old sedan in the driveway and walked in through the side door, which was always unlocked because our neighborhood was safe. She was in the kitchen, washing dishes. The radio was playing some old jazz music. "Mom," I said. She turned around, smiled, and said, "Hey, sweetie, are you hungry? I made your favorite pasta." I took a deep breath and said, "Someone came to see me at work today." She had a birth certificate from St. Francis Hospital with your name on it, and it shows that I have a twin. Her hand stopped moving under the faucet, but she kept smiling. "Oh. Who was it?" "Probably someone trying to pull a prank. You're a NICU nurse, you know how some people can be around hospitals." She didn't ask for any details, not even what the woman looked like. It was as if she already knew. The next morning, my Aunt Sarah, who is 45 and works at a hair salon, called me. "Honey, your mom told me what happened at work. I just want to make sure you're okay. You've been under a lot of stress lately, you know." She didn't ask if it was true or if I really had a twin. It was like they were already trying to downplay the situation. Then my grandmother, Helen, who is 72 and a retired schoolteacher, called. "Vivian, don't break your mother's heart. She raised you alone for all these years and gave up so much. You owe her your trust." Those words felt like a punch in the gut. After all these years of lies, she wanted me to trust her? That night, after my shift, I sat on my bed with my laptop and did something I should have done years ago. I googled NICU chest scar newborn. As a NICU nurse, I knew what thoracotomy scars looked like, but I'd never connected my own scar to my work. The images I saw matched my scar exactly. It was clear that it was from an emergency chest surgery, not a tangled umbilical cord. The next morning, I pulled out my birth certificate from my file at home. It listed St. Luke's Hospital as my birthplace. I called and St. Luke's during my break. "Hi, I'm requesting my birth records. Last name Thompson, first name Vivian, date of birth May 20th. After some typing and clicking, the woman on the phone said, "I'm sorry, ma'am. We don't have any record of a birth under that name on that date." I asked her to check again, but she said there were no Thompson births in their system for that month. My mother had changed the hospital on my paperwork to cover up the truth. 3 days later, I met Ava at a coffee shop in downtown Boston. We sat in a corner booth and laid our birth certificates side by side on the table. Hers was from St. Francis Hospital, and mine was from St. Luke's. Same mother, same date, but different hospitals. It was obvious that someone had changed one of them. Ava told me that her adoptive mother, Mrs. Carter, was a NICU nurse at St. Francis Hospital. That's how she found out about me. Her parents had been on the adoption list for a while, and when the hospital flagged the twins and my mother wanted to relinquish, they came in. Before I went to visit Mrs. Carter in Providence, I went back to my mother's apartment. It was a Wednesday afternoon, and she was at work until 6. I still had my key. I felt a bit guilty going through her things, but I needed to know the truth. In her apartment, it was eerily quiet. There was no radio playing, just the hum of the refrigerator. Under her bed, behind a pair of old winter boots, I found a shoebox. The lid was taped shut with old, yellowed tape. I peeled it off carefully. Inside was a yellowed envelope from St. Francis Hospital. It was a hospital bill, itemized. The total was $16,500. The charges were for an extended NICU stay, neonatal respiratory care for 23 days, a thoracotomy on the third day, and incubator rental for 23 days. It was clear that this was the bill for my stay in the NICU. Behind the envelope, there was a smaller one. Inside, there was $1,000 in old bills and a slip of paper with the words final payment and the initials MC Mrs. Carter. It was the last installment of the deal my mother had made. I photographed everything and put it all back exactly where I found it. That afternoon, I called St. Francis Hospital's records department. They confirmed that there were records for the Thompson twins. Baby A was 7 pounds 6 ounces, healthy, and was discharged on the second day. Baby B, me, was 4 pounds 9 ounces, had respiratory distress syndrome, had a thoracotomy on the third day, and stayed in the NICU for 23 days. I drove to Providence on a Saturday morning. Ava had called ahead, and Mrs. Carter knew I was coming. She lived in a small cottage on a quiet street. She opened the door before I even reached the steps. "You must be Vivian," she said. She was 66, with silver hair and kind eyes. She led me into the living room and sat me down on the couch. She then brought out a manila folder. The first page was the NICU admission record. It was all there, the details of my difficult start in life. She said, "I held you every day during my shifts. You were so small, and you'd hold on to my finger so tightly. Your mother never once came to visit you. I always thought about you, and when my husband passed away, I told Ava the whole truth and encouraged her to find you. I learned that my mother had signed relinquishment papers for both of us on the first day. The Carters could only take one child, so they chose the healthy one, Ava. 3 days later, after my surgery, they came back to see if they could take me too, but my mother had changed her mind. Mrs. Carter told me that it wasn't because she wanted me, it was because she was too ashamed to go home empty-handed after telling everyone she was having one child. I drove back to Boston in silence. All the way, I thought about how my mother had lied to me for all these years. When I got home, I called her. "Mom, can I come over tomorrow? I want to talk." Her voice changed immediately. "Of course, sweetie. Anytime." I could tell she knew what was coming. The next evening, I went to her apartment. She was sitting in her favorite chair by the window. I stood in the middle of the room and said, "I found the records, Mom. St. Francis Hospital, Baby A and Baby B." She looked at me for a long time, and then she started to cry, but it was a controlled cry, the kind she always did to seem vulnerable without really being so. "You don't understand, Vivian. I saved you. You would have ended up in the foster care system," she said. I asked her, "Saved me from what?" She didn't answer. She couldn't because the truth was that she saved me from being unwanted. I told her I'd be at Sunday dinner and that I just wanted her to know. She whispered, "Please don't do this at Sunday dinner, Vivian." I didn't turn around. By Thursday, she'd already called my aunt and grandmother and changed the story. They both called me, trying to convince me that I was stressed and being manipulated. On Sunday, at 4:30 in the afternoon, I sat in my car in her driveway. I could see my aunt's car and my grandmother's old car parked outside. I thought about all the Sunday dinners we'd had, all the times I'd believed that I was loved and chosen. I walked into the house. My grandmother was in the kitchen setting the table. She looked at me and said, "You look just like your mother did at your age." I asked her, did I look like her when she came home from the hospital with me? Her expression changed, and she looked tired. She looked more tired than I expected for someone who'd had an easy delivery, she said. In the dining room, my mother was putting out the food. She saw me and looked at my purse for a moment too long. "Before we eat, I want to say something," she said. She sat down at the head of the table and said, "I know you've been going through a hard time, Vivian, and this family loves you. Whatever this is about, we're here for you." Just then, my phone buzzed. It was Ava. My mother's face changed. "That's her, isn't it? That woman who's been filling your head with nonsense," she said. My aunt and grandmother started to side with her, telling me to block Ava. I took a deep breath and said, "Her name is Ava. She's my twin sister, and she's not harassing me." I reached into my purse, pulled out the envelope, and slid it across the table to my mother. "Open it." She looked at the envelope, and her face went white. She knew what was inside. She picked it up and tore it in half, then into quarters, and dropped the pieces on her plate. "This is nothing. Someone printed fake documents to manipulate you," she said. But I was prepared. I pulled out another copy. "I have 4 copies, Mom. And the originals are with Mrs. Carter in Providence. This is the real birth certificate from St. Francis Hospital. You changed the hospital on my paperwork." I showed them the NICU records and pulled down my collar to show them the scar. "This scar is from a thoracotomy, not a tangled umbilical cord. I'm a NICU nurse, I know what these scars look like." My aunt's hand went over her mouth, and she started to cry. "When I came to the hospital that day, there were 2 incubators in your room. You told me one was someone else's baby." "I believed you," she said. My mother stood up, shouting, "I saved you. You should be grateful I kept you." I looked at her calmly and said, "You didn't save me, Mom. You kept me because you were too ashamed to go home empty-handed. There's a difference." No one spoke for a long time. My grandmother walked out of the room without a word. My aunt reached across the table and said, "I'm sorry, Vivian. I should have asked more questions." My mother sat back down, defeated. I picked up my purse and all the documents and walked out the front door. I didn't look back. In my car, I called Ava. "How did it go?" she asked. She knew what was inside the envelope. "She's always known," I said. A week has passed, and my mother hasn't called. For so many years, her calls were a part of my life, but now there's just silence. It's a strange feeling, a mix of grief and relief. My aunt has called to apologize again, and my grandmother has also reached out, crying and saying she didn't know everything. I've blocked my mother's number. It was a hard decision, but I know it's the right one. I'm finally starting to accept that being kept is not the same as being loved. And I'm ready to move forward with Ava by my side. We're learning about each other, making up for all the lost time. I'm no longer the baby she gave away, I'm a strong woman who's finally free from the lies. I am Vivian, and I am completely mine.